In Chicago, the approach of summer brings a mix of joy and dread. The welcome warmer weather also means a spike in crime. This month, shootings are already running 50% higher than last May. Tackling that enormous challenge is Chicago's new police superintendent, Eddie Johnson, a 28-year veteran of a department that is now struggling to regain the trust of city residents. Johnson took office when the Chicago Police Department was reeling from the political aftershocks of the Laquan McDonald video. Then Superintendent Gary McCarthy took the fall after months of protests calling for his firing. In March, Johnson was handpicked by Mayor Emanuel, who rejected out-of-town candidates recommended after a national search.
I believe he is the right person at the right time to serve as interim superintendent. He has the command, the character, and the capability to lead the department at this critical juncture.
Now, after just 6 weeks on the job, Johnson has taken a tough stance. Last week, Chicago police arrested more than 140 people on gang-related charges. Johnson says police will continue to crack down on violent offenders. Already this year, more than 200 people have been killed and 1,300 shot. A makeshift memorial marks the spot where one of the most recent victims, a city emergency dispatcher, was gunned down just 2 blocks from police headquarters. Another unintended victim of the mayhem on Chicago's streets.
This incident right here highlights what I've been saying for the last month and a half about how brazen these violent offenders are.
Residents across Chicago are voicing their fear and frustration. This past weekend, they took to the streets, demanding that more be done to confront the violence.
We've got to look at ourselves and decide we are not going to allow shooting and killing to go on in our streets and our blocks while we live there, while we walk there.
And Robin Robinson sat down with Superintendent Eddie Johnson to discuss the challenges facing Chicago police and how he plans to confront the city's rising violence.
I'm here with the new Chicago Police Superintendent, Eddie Johnson. He's not that new anymore. He's had, he says, a year's worth of work in the first couple of months. I should point out to everyone that I've been doing some work with you, trying to build some of the community relationships that you think are so important. In fact, you think it might be the most important thing.
Yeah, I do. The community relationship with the police department is the #1 thing I think that will help us reduce this violence.
You have said that you are going to have zero tolerance. The department is going to have zero tolerance for violence. What exactly does that mean?
That means that if you choose to engage in violence, then we'll bring everything we have at our disposal to hold you accountable for your actions. But I will tell you this, Robin, those individuals that are engaging in this behavior, if they want to go a different direction, we will also offer them outreach services to try to put their lives back on track.
So you can offer something besides arrest and incarceration?
Yes, we started a diversion program roughly about a month ago. So we've had several individuals who have been arrested choose that option. So we're getting them outreach. So those criminal activities won't even appear on their arrest history now.
The traditional mode of policing, enforcing the law, arresting people.
Right.
And some say contributing to a culture of violence in these communities.
Yes. The mission of police should change a bit, and we should become more of a partner with the communities rather than a force that comes in and just arrests people.
Certain police union rules seem to be in the way of swift justice when there's police misconduct suspected. Right. The contract is opening up. Are you pushing for major changes? I think that in order for discipline to be effective, it has to be efficient and handed down quickly. We need to be more flexible in terms of the protections that we have, because you don't want to unduly punish good people for making honest mistakes. But those that choose to engage in intentional misconduct, they should be punished severely and quickly. You do have people at the police board meeting, your first police board meeting as superintendent, who are talking about cases that are 2 and 3 years old and wondering why the officers that they've accused of wrongdoing are still on the street. Yeah, certainly. It is the wheels of justice sometimes do turn slowly within the police department. So we're working to try to speed things up because they have a valid argument. You know, I do agree that we need to be quicker, but we need to get it right, though. If it takes a long time to have your accusation of misconduct actually go through the system, some people won't even complain. The community members say, why would I file a complaint? They're not going to do anything. We do take our allegations of misconduct very seriously, and I do recognize that it goes slowly sometimes.
But I would hope that that wouldn't keep people from making the allegations, because if we have bad officers out there, we want to get them off the street, because one bad cop makes us all look bad.
Speaking of bad officers out there, one thing that you said within a few days of becoming superintendent was that you felt 99% of Chicago police sworn personnel were good. Is that still something you stand by?
Yeah, I believe the majority are, and don't get me wrong, I'm not naive. I know that we have bad cops out there. I mean, we're not a perfect agency, and I don't know what organization is perfect, but I'm just dealing with CPD. So I do recognize that we have bad cops out there, and my goal is to root them out and get them off the force, because our job is to be partners with the community. I have to try to rebuild the trust that the community has lost in us, because when I say to you, I believe that the police department is only as effective as the trust that the community has in it. I really believe that.
But I'm sure every superintendent has said, I want to root out bad cops. They undermine what we're doing. What is it that you're going to do differently?
I'll tell you this. Day one, I instructed the Internal Affairs Bureau to create a mechanism to, A, be able to identify problematic behavior a lot quicker than we had before. Because to be quite frank about it, our system was broken. So we're fixing that. B, I'm making it easier for police officers to report misconduct. Those officers that report misconduct, I'm creating a mechanism so that they won't be ostracized for reporting that misconduct. So we're moving forward with some things to make it better.
How are you addressing the climate and culture really within the department?
Well, those things are difficult, and it won't be easy to change them overnight, but you have to start somewhere. So one of the things that I implemented right after taking this seat was our new recruits are now engaging in what's called peace circles. So you have people from a different culture that go into the inner city neighborhoods, and I think the last one was at Marshall High School, where you have police officers that aren't accustomed to being in black neighborhoods interact with these black teenagers. And it solves two things. First of all, it gets those new police officers to see these teenagers in a different light, so that they do understand they're human and they're not all bad people. But conversely, it lets those teenagers see that these policemen are people too, because oftentimes they just see the uniform and that's how they, address us. But when they see the police officers as humans with the same frailties and faults that they have, then it makes it an easier transition.
The dehumanization of both groups has been cited as a big part of the problem. Also, community members at town halls and community forums and at the police board meeting, everybody's complaining that the police in my neighborhood don't look like my neighborhood. What are you going to do about diversity in the department?
Well, I am a firm believer that the police department should reflect the city as a whole. So what we found out was we did a huge recruiting drive to get minorities to apply for the police test 2 tests ago, and we kind of failed at trying to get the numbers in that we wanted. And we realized the problem was that we were trying to communicate with the young folks like we're used to communicating, which is through your alderman's office, through print media, through television ads. What we discovered this last time around is that young folks get their information through social media.
You think?
So we targeted social media, and this time the entry exam is 71% minority applicants. So that should bolster up the diversity that we're looking for.
But that'll take some time.
It will.
Because these are just the applicants.
It will.
They're not even in the academy
Correct.
yet. So what is the current makeup of the force?
So right now we're looking at about 12,500 members, sworn members. And out of that, I think we have like roughly 2,300 African Americans. So it's difficult to say I'm going to put all those African Americans in African American communities, because number one, they have contractual rights, so they can bid out of different districts if they choose to. I encourage them to work in neighborhoods that they're familiar with, but more than that, we just have to make sure and ensure that the police that are in those communities treat the communities fairly, respectfully, and professionally.
Within the department, the task force on police accountability said there is racism here, has been, still is. It's the problem. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not naive, Robin. I know we have racism in America, we have racism in Chicago, so it only follows that there would be racism within the CPD. And what I would say to those individuals is you need to check your racism at the door when you leave every day. Is it going to be that simple? No. But officers have to know, and like I said before, the majority of officers are trying to do the right thing. But those that want to be racist and engage in inappropriate behavior, we have zero tolerance for them. And once it's identified, then we'll handle it accordingly.
Naming it, has that made a difference?
I think so. I think before you can fix something, you have to acknowledge that that problem exists. And I think for years, I don't know of CPD ever acknowledging that we had a racial issue within the department, but we do. I mean, and it's not something that we should hide from. We should embrace the fact that we know it's there and try to do something about it.
Would you say that you're looking for tweaks or a radical
No,
change?
I'm looking for a radical change because I just believe that if I can make CPD better, then I make the city of Chicago better.
What's the climate in the department right now? Is morale low?
The rank and file is in a good place in terms of morale. We started off a little shaky at the beginning of the year, but there was a lot of contributing factors to that. So I think it's stabilized now, and I think that they recognize that I do have their best interests at heart.
It could be argued that you got this job because there was no way to fire the mayor. That people were demanding that that there be major changes, and so McCarthy was out. You are in. You did not want this job. Now that you're in it, are we going to really see something that we haven't seen before?
We are. And let me clarify it a little bit. It wasn't that I didn't want the job. I had intended on maybe applying for it later on down the line. But to be quite honest, two things happened for me. John Escalante, who was the first deputy, took over as interim superintendent, and he and I have come along through our careers, so out of respect for him, I didn't apply for it. But at the same time, in my 28 years on the job, I never applied for a position. I just went where they told me to go. But now that I'm here, my goal is to be the best superintendent I possibly can and to change CPD moving forward, because we're at a critical time in history right now. This time, right now, we have an opportunity to change how things are. So I'm embracing that. The Department of Justice review that's going on right now, I say bring it on, because I think it's good for an agency to have an outside set of eyes looking at it to ensure that we do things correctly.
So your goal is to change. Do you have complete power to do that?
Yes, I think, when the mayor and I had conversations before I accepted the job, and I think that he realizes I'm a cop. That's what I know how to do. I don't know how to do the politics. I'm not a lawyer, so I know how to be a cop. And to this point, he's been very supportive. And at the end of the day, he's as passionate about reducing this violence in Chicago as I am. But up to this point, he's let me run the Chicago Police Department. And I think, but I will say this, if he has a suggestion or a recommendation, I'm willing to listen, because you never know where you're going to get that nugget from that can change the course of how you do things.
One of the things that has changed is the release of these videos, whereas in the past it's taken months and months of fighting in court with the city saying, no, we're not going to release them. Are you of the opinion that we should just see them all now?
The public is asking for it, and to be quite honest, I don't know that it would really adversely affect a lot of cases. So I would say, put it out there, let them see. And that's why I embrace the body cameras, because the body cameras will give us the ability to tell our side of the story also. So, yeah, I don't see an issue with letting the public see these videos.
But when we see them, there's an emotional reaction, and it's very negative in terms of police. And the word on the street right now is that police are aware of that and are kind of pulling back, and that those who would cause trouble or commit crimes feel like they got a free pass right now.
Well, I would dispute that. In the beginning of the year, we did see some reluctance on the part of police officers, but they were confused about a lot of different changes. Now it's stabilized, and to be quite honest, our gun arrests are more than we had at this time last year. So that shows you that the officers are actively engaging the people that they should be engaging. Part of the problem before was that I think we contacted people that really didn't need to be contacted. So as long as we stick with stopping the right people at the right times for the right reasons, we'll be fine.
So not profiling.
Correct.
Basically. Shootings up 50% already over last year. Are we in for a really terrible Chicago summer?
Well, I'm concerned about the summer. I'm concerned because any level of violence is unacceptable. That's the downside. The upside is this. We got off to a really bad start at the beginning of the year, and now we've seen those numbers steadily declining. So that's progress. It's not success, but it's still of a concern to me, yes.
Is what we're seeing in terms of violence in communities really a law enforcement problem? Do you have any kind of, are you being set up for failure because you're trying to police communities that need something besides policing?
Well, I don't think I'm being set up for failure, but I will say this. It's more, we'll never arrest our way out of this situation. That just won't happen. So unfortunately, a lot of the societal ills get dumped at the doorstep of the police department. So it's going to take the police, the residents, clergy, politicians, business owners. Everybody has a vested interest in stopping this violence in Chicago. A lot of the gang members that I talk to out there have said to me if they had jobs or a way to support their families or their shorties, as they call them, then they wouldn't engage in that behavior. So we have to look at alternatives to get these people something to get their lives back on track.
Back to the racial component once again. People are kind of giving you a little breathing room here, but there's also, you know, some rumbling. Just because you're black doesn't mean you're going to be better for the African Americans who disproportionately have a lot of contact with police.
Right.
What are you going to have to do to prove that you're not just being kind of propped up to appease people?
Given the time that we're looking for, I think that people will recognize that, A, I am trying to make CPD better, and if I make CPD better, then that will directly impact some of the violence out here because people will be more prone to share information with us. And I think a lot of it right now, people just don't feel comfortable sharing information with the police.
You've said you want to be tougher on violent crimes
Right.
and stop arresting and incarcerating people for low-level, you know, drug crimes, et cetera. But there's some criticism of that. If you're tougher on violent crimes, that's still probably going to result in the incarceration of a lot of young black men.
We have roughly 1,300 to 1,400 individuals in the city of Chicago right now that are driving most of our violent crimes. So that's 70 to 75% of the people are repeat gun offenders. Those individuals need to be held accountable for what they do. So I'm reaching out to our judicial and legislators to help me hold them accountable.
But isn't that the same cycle? Even if you arrest all 1,300 of them and put them away for 20 years, the places where they came from will just grow 1,300 more, won't they?
Well, that's where the outreach comes in, and the communities can take back those different blocks and neighborhoods. The mayor and I talk about all the time, if we create a vacuum in that particular neighborhood, we have to put something in there so that the gang members don't come back and take that over. So those are things moving forward that we all have to be a part of.
Sounds like you have a big job ahead of you.
Yeah.
Good luck. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We
Thank you
appreciate
for
it.
having me.
Chris, back to you in studio.
Thank you, Robin. Joining us now to talk more about the challenges facing Superintendent Johnson and other topics are Daryl Denard, host of Chicago Speaks on V103 FM, Sam Charles, crime reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times, and Bishop Charles Mickens, senior pastor for Lights of Zion Ministries, and welcome, everyone. So, Daryl, we just heard the superintendent promising to make radical change in the Chicago Police Department. Is he the one to pull off radical change after spending nearly 3 decades there?
It's almost impossible for radical change, only because the mechanisms that are in place don't allow radical change. The findings of the Police Accountability Task Force, which were handed down, I guess, about a month ago, said that there are 3 major issues or 3 major areas that truly need addressing. One is systemic racism within the department itself. The other, the sentencing laws with regard to people that commit crimes. And the third aspect that truly needed to be addressed is a contract with the FOP in terms of the Fraternal Order of Police. That contract is coming up for negotiation, I guess, within a year, and that's really where the police have the opportunity to change things, but they're going to be unwilling to do so. And I asked the superintendent himself just last week, what could he do about the contract? And he said his hands are kind of tied. So in terms of radical change, the true radical change is going to have to happen at an organic level where everybody in the community wants to buy in to support whatever mechanisms we need to create better communities.
Sam, at one point, Superintendent Johnson had said that he never saw misconduct in his career. Now, in this interview, he's saying that he realizes that there are bad cops and he's not naive and he wants to root them out. Is he able to do it, or is Daryl right? Does the police union contract make that very difficult?
Well, the union contract, I mean, certainly raises a lot of problems because it's pretty ironclad until the negotiations come up
if
again.
I'm not mistaken, one of the areas there where if you make a statement with regard to the commission of a potential crime, you have the ability under the contract, and I may be wrong here, to literally change your initial statement that you made to the people that are investigating you.
But as far as changing the culture goes, like Robin addressed it in the piece we just saw, it's like there's kind of a dehumanization aspect on both sides, both police and the communities themselves. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding as a result of that. So in terms of breaking down these kind of facades on both sides, that's kind of the first step to changing that culture, or one of the steps, maybe not the first one, but one of them. So it would, like I said, those kind of aspects are really what needs to be going on. In terms
Bishop,
of,
you've covered this and been involved in this issue for many, many years. From your vantage point in the neighborhood, in the community, does it sound like Superintendent Johnson is trying to take the right steps?
I believe that he's trying to take the right steps, and it's going to take a little bit more than that. We've got to be there to support him, as well as the community itself get involved. I mean, we've got to have the community involved. It's going to be almost impossible if we can identify putting the right policemen in the right areas. There still have to be people that's got to be able to speak up for the issues that take place in the community, because all the perpetrators that are out there, they know when to come out. And somehow somebody's got to speak up when they come out, so that we can find out who they are and address the issues.
Well, there's been this no snitch culture in Chicago for a long time. Does that keep the police from doing their jobs?
To a certain extent. I truly believe that, look at the perpetrators now. They're so systematic in that they find the places where there's no cameras to allow their crimes to take place. And so there's got to be people that are there in the community that are willing to speak up and take back control.
There's been a bit of a crackdown lately, Darrell. We saw more than 100 arrests of gang-related
Almost 120, if I'm not
criminals
mistaken.
about a week ago. Do you see a get tough stance coming from Johnson?
I think that, there's always been a get tough stance with regard to those that commit crime. The problem is that when that person is then taken over to the correctional facility as they await trial or await being at least charged with the crime, then many cases they're right back out on the street. So I could be arrested even for gun possession, and literally have been arrested for gun possession 3 or 4 times before, and then 2 to 3 weeks later, I'm back out on the street. So you can arrest all you want to, but if the judges aren't able to say, if you are arrested for a gun violation, which many people feel is a serious offense, then you're going to do 3 to 4 years, like they do in many states, New York State being one.
Well, Sam, that's really an interesting point, because Superintendent Johnson is singing the same tune that Superintendent McCarthy sang before him, that these gun violators don't stay in jail long enough, and that the Illinois laws, frankly, are too lame.
No, that's definitely the company line, as we've come to know in the last few years. So I guess I just said started with Superintendent McCarthy. And I mean, a lot of the actions that we've seen Superintendent Johnson take so far, to me, seem to be a lot of perpetuating optics. Like, he wants to show that they arrested nearly 140 gang members over a sweep. And a few weeks ago, they had the same thing, one in Uptown and one in West Garfield Park. But at the same time, he's announcing these arrests, 2 people are shot, one fatally, a city worker outside of Starbucks, a block and a half from police headquarters. I mean, these issues are still so deeply rooted that, a great press conference here and there, that's great for the evening news, but they don't really address the deep-rooted issues that are driving these things.
One of the things, Bishop, that Robin addressed there was having the police department look like the community, and now we're hearing that 70% of the applicants for the new police exam are African American. Is that going to be a big help to get a more diverse police force?
I don't think that the problem necessarily is who the policemen are in the community. I think is who the perpetrators are. Again, I go back to that. They're finding these hiding places, and they're coming out. I had the violence hit right at our church doorstep when Terrell Bosley was shot and killed in my parking lot several years ago. And
A member of your church, if I'm not
yes,
mistaken.
exactly. He was a musician and bass player at our church. And so that allowed me, as a pastor, I had to come outside of the walls of the church to go into the community to try to address some of these issues and let some of the perpetrators that are in the community know that there is a different way of life than rather just taking people's lives. And that is, I realized in doing so and in confronting with a lot of the people that are in the community, is to mentor them. They need mentorship. They need men that are willing to come out and to share some time with them.